Welcome to our discussion on indirect strategies used by interest groups, as well as a summary of the chapter. Reaching out to persuade the public that the interest group's position is right, deploying citizens as grassroots lobbyists, and electioneering are some of the indirect strategies interest groups use to pursue their public policy agendas. Indirect tactics are likely to be ongoing rather than targeted at a specific piece of legislation, although that is not always the case. Interest groups work hard and use a variety of strategies to make the public, government officials, their own members, and potential members aware of issues of concern and to educate people about their positions on the issues. Some interest groups focus solely on educating the public and hope that through their efforts people will be concerned enough to take steps to have a particular policy established or changed. In doing so, the groups promote civic engagement by informing individuals about important policy concerns, even if the information they provide is skewed toward the group's views. The groups also encourage civic discourse by bringing issues into the public arena. Often, they do so by mounting advertising campaigns to alert the public about an issue. NARAL, Pro-Choice America, used such strategy during the 2008 elections when the League took ads in many traditionally Democratic states urging the election of pro-choice senators and alerting the public to the important role of the U.S. Senate playing in confirming U.S. Supreme Court nominees. The ads stressed that the balance of the court could shift in favor of an overruling of abortion protections if a sitting justice were to retire and be replaced by a pro-life justice. Sometimes, interest groups and corporations engage in climate control, the practice of using public outreach to build favorable public opinion of the organization or company. The logic behind the climate control is simple. If a corporation or an organization has the goodwill of the public on its side, enacting its legislative agenda or getting its policy priorities passed will be easier because government will know of, and many even share, the public's positive opinion of the organization. For example, when Walmart started to see opposition to the construction of its superstores in communities across the country, it relied on public relations techniques, particularly advertising, to convince people that Walmart is a good corporate citizen. As critics complained about Walmart's harmful effects on smaller local merchants, the firm's ads touted Walmart's positive contributions to its host communities. When opponents publicized the company's low-wage jobs, Walmart countered with ads featuring employees who had started in entry-level positions and risen through the ranks to managerial posts. These ads would be viewed both by policymakers, municipal planning boards, for example, and by citizens whose opinions matter to those policymakers. This type of climate control is designed to soften opposition and to increase community goodwill. Other groups, especially those without a great deal of access to policymakers, may engage in protest and civil disobedience to be heard. Sometimes leaders calculate that media attention to their actions will increase public awareness and spark widespread support for their cause. Interest groups often engage in the indirect strategy of electioneering, working to influence the election of candidates who support their issues. All the tactics of electioneering are active methods of civic participation. These techniques include endorsing particular candidates or positions and conducting voter registration and get-out-the-vote drives. Grassroots campaign efforts often put interest groups with large memberships, including labor unions, at an advantage. Campaign contributions are considered a key element of electioneering. The importance of contributions puts wealthier interest groups, including corporate and business groups, at an advantage. Incumbent candidates have a significant edge in raising money from political action committees, as you can see from this chart. These data indicate that most PACs recognize that incumbents, who are most likely to win re-election, are best situated to look after their interest after the election. This is known as the incumbent advantage. The issue of party affiliation also matters to political action committees. Business PACs and individuals with business interests make up the largest source of revenue for political candidates and tend to favor Republicans over Democrats. Labor groups and individuals associated with them give overwhelmingly to Democratic candidates, but they contribute a great deal less money than do business PACs. Ideologically driven PACs and individuals are nearly evenly divided between Democrats and Republicans. Interest groups also commonly use the tactics of endorsements and ratings to attract support for the candidates whom they favor and to reduce the electoral chances of those whom they do not. Through endorsements, an interest group formally supports specific candidates and typically notifies its members and the media of that support. An endorsement may also involve financial support from the interest group's PAC, and by the technique of rating candidates, the interest group examines candidates' responses to a questionnaire issued by the group. Sometimes a group rates members of Congress on the basis of how they voted on measures important to the group. the ratings of a liberal interest group such as the Americans for Democratic Action, or ADA, or a conservative interest group such as the American Conservative Union, ACU, can serve as an ideological benchmark. So, for example, as senators in 2007, both Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama had ADA ratings of 75, while Republican John McCain had an ADA rating of 10. McCain had an ACU rating of 82, and Clinton and Obama each had about an 8 with the ACU. Interest groups' ratings are used by voters in the media to evaluate candidates and also by candidates themselves, who may advertise their ratings to their targeted constituencies. The influence of money on politics is not a recent phenomenon. Louise Overacker, one of the first political scientists to do research on campaign finance, wrote in 1932, "Any effective program of control must make it possible to bring into the light the sources and amounts of all funds used in political campaigns, and the way in which those funds are expended. Negatively, it must not attempt to place legal limitations upon the size of contributions or expenditures." Years later, Congress saw the wisdom of Overacker's analysis and enacted regulations stipulating that a group that contributes to any candidate's campaign must register as a political action committee, or PAC. For that reason, most interest groups form PACs as one arm of their organization, though federal law now permits corporations and labor unions to use their financial resources to purchase advertisements for federal campaigns directly. Whereas an interest group pursues a group's broad goals by engaging in a variety of activities, its PAC raises and spends money to influence the outcome of an election. Typically, it will do so by contributing to candidates' campaigns. Funding campaigns helps an interest group in various ways. For one thing, it establishes the interest group as a formal supporter of one or more candidates. And importantly, campaign contributions are a door opener for any interest group's lobbyists. For a lobbyist, access to policymakers is crucial, and campaign contributions provide a means of contact and help ensure that a phone call will be returned or an invitation responded to, even if the policymaker does not support the group's position on every issue. In this table, it lists PACs that contributed the most money to U.S. campaigns and highlights the party their contributions favor. As the table illustrates, many businesses and corporate PACs favor Republicans, whereas labor groups tend to support Democrats. More consistently, PACs, particularly those formed by economic interest groups, overwhelmingly favor incumbents. Once again, that's the incumbent advantage. PACs, powers that be, know that incumbent candidates are most likely to be re-elected, and thus PACs support their re-election bids. As we will examine further in the next chapter, interest groups rely on political action committees to channel their support to candidates that espouse their views. Interest groups are a powerful vehicle by which individuals can join forces and collectively persuade policymakers to take legislative action on their goals. As such, interest groups play a strong role in the policy-making process. Throughout U.S. history and continuing today, the prevalence of interest groups is testimony to people's desire to influence the pathways of their society and government. Interest groups are one of the great leveling devices in U.S. politics. They are organizations that enable regular Jills and Joes to influence policy through collective action and organization. And although not all Americans are equally likely to join and form interest groups represent an avenue of participation open to all, and with enough variety in tactics and strategies to offer appealing means of civic participation to a broad spectrum of the population. Particularly today, with the Internet providing a highly accessible medium for participation, interest groups give individuals the opportunity to increase their own social capital, to improve their own lives and the life of their community by making government more responsive to their needs and concerns, and by increasing the effectiveness of the public policy-making process. Although there are competing opinions about the role and values of interest groups in U.S. politics, their influence in policymaking is unquestioned. Thus, interest groups offer enormous potential for people who wish to become civically engaged. The abundance of groups for virtually every cause and the ability of anyone to form his or her own group means that like-minded individuals can work together to ensure that government policy represents their views. How does the number of groups available today differ from decades past? What is the result of that difference in terms of potential members? Today, through the Internet and other digital technology, interest groups can provide individuals with instantly accessed information and organizational tools. Advances in computing, telephone communications, and television have opened the doors to participation in politics and the government in ways that were undreamed of a few decades ago. Thanks to technology, the potential exists for interest groups to reach new and ever-widening audiences. As we have seen, however, the potential audience, at least in the present day, excludes many members of the working class who may not have been socialized to take part in groups and who may lack the time and means to access computer technology. This lack of access poses a challenge to interest groups as they rely ever more heavily on digital recruiting, communicating, organizing, and fundraising. How will technologies continue to alter the landscape for interest groups? In becoming increasingly dependent on relatively low-cost technological tools, interest groups also have to deal with the challenge of paying for the expertise needed to design, build, and maintain their websites and weblogs. Once such issues are resolved, and once access is open to those not currently wired, digital strategies will further strengthen the clout and efficacy of interest groups, and these groups will speak for a broader swath of Americans. Interest groups often offer individuals a vehicle for engaging in civic actions and improving their communities and nation as a whole. The positive impacts of improved social capital are reciprocal. As participation benefits individuals, it also benefits communities and larger governments, which in turn provide benefits to the individuals, and so on. Interest groups also have some downsides. They can allow well-organized minority views to dominate over less well-organized majority viewpoints. They emphasize the role of money in politics. They strengthen the incumbency advantage of elected office holders, and they tend to draw participants disproportionately from among society's elites. Who joins interest groups and why? Although interest groups serve as an accessible channel for citizen participation, not everyone is equally likely to join or form an interest group. In general, people with high incomes, individuals who are upper middle class and middle class, and those with high levels of education are more likely to join interest groups than are those with low incomes, those who are lower middle class and working class, and those who have less education. In addition, some people join interest groups related to their occupation. People typically join interest groups for a variety of reasons that can be categorized as solidarity incentives, purposive incentives, and economic incentives. How interest groups succeed? Interest groups succeed by using their organizational resources and maximizing the effectiveness of their organizational environment. Organizational resources consists of groups' members and financial resources. The organizational environment comprises the group's leadership and the presence of opposing or competitive interest groups in the policymaking environment. Types of interest groups. Interest groups typically fall into one of three categories. Economic interest groups, such as business, agricultural, or labor union groups, advocate for financial benefits for their members in the form of subsidies or wage policies, for example. Public and ideological interest groups lobby for policies that affect public or collective goods and include abortion rights and environmental groups. Foreign governments and corporations also use interest groups to influence a wide variety of policies, especially trade and military policy. Interest group strategies. Interest groups usually combine direct and indirect strategies in their attempts to influence the policy process. Direct strategies typically involve lobbying a policymaker, and indirect strategies may include using public outreach to build favorable public opinion of the organization. Climate control. Using campaign contributions and electioneering to influence who will be making policy, and educating the public so that they share a group's position and can convey what they view to policymakers. Interest groups, politics and money, the influence of PACs. PACs are the tool by which interest groups contribute to electoral campaigns. Some PACs are partisan, but in general, PACs tend to support incumbent candidates, making it difficult for non-incumbents effectively to challenge those already in office.